My fingers froze on the stiff keyboard as my phone screen flashed. An automated message from the internal legal department, initiated by Stilson himself, stabbed right into my eyes. Subject: emergency voting notice, reassessment, and revocation of founding shares. My throat choked with bitterness. 30 years of our two fathers draining their sweat on muddy fields had just been brutally severed by a single mouse click from a room where only the sharp clicking of keys on a glass desk echoed, barely 20 steps away from me. Hello everyone, I am Fabio. I need an anonymous place to vent out this entire nightmare before it explodes at the shareholder meeting next Friday. The story began in the suburbs of Madison, Wisconsin, over 30 years ago. My dad, Mr. Raphael, and Uncle Yannickson, Stilson's dad, used to share the bone-chilling cold of the Wisconsin blizzards whipping through the gaps in the wooden boards. They had nothing but cracked, bleeding hands from milking cows for hire and a burning desire to change their lives. Back then, my dad buried his head in yellowed biological documents under the sickly yellow light at the library, finding a way to force a grass variety to grow in the bone-chilling winter while remaining packed with protein. Uncle Yannickson contributed a barren plot of land, so dry and cracked it would tear up the soles of your shoes, and a few emaciated cows. My dad mixed the formula. Uncle Yannickson hoed the soil until his hands blistered. They pinned the very first seeds into the cold ground. The aurora blue grass exploded, its lush green color covering an entire hillside. Cows produced milk overflowing the vats. From a rickety shed, the two men gave birth to grass gold. The company swallowed the market whole from Wisconsin to Michigan, then bound a series of giant farms across the United States with exclusive bags of feed. Grass Gold split its shares in half. My dad ran the research lab, where the exhaust fans hummed day and night. Uncle Yannickson managed the operations factory, where the conveyor belts ground loudly without ever resting. The two of them never let a single dime chip away at their brotherhood, and then the kids like us jumped in. I got my hands dirty in the lab, my hands always tainted with the freezing cold of the sample storage freezers, to rise to the head of product development. Stilson took a spin through business school in Chicago, hauled back a shiny master's degree, and kicked others aside to plop down into the chief strategy officer's chair. 2 generations operating smoothly. But that was not the worst part. In recent years, Uncle Yannickson's health plummeted. He hacked and coughed, withdrew from the board, and threw his entire voting power into Stilson's hands. My dad took a step back, yielding the playground to the nephew he once held in his arms. That was when the blade began resting against his throat. Exploiting the clinking sound of silver cutlery against porcelain plates at shareholder parties, Stilson whispered a new script into their ears. He whitewashed my dad's contributions, whispering that what made Aurora blue was the pH level and trace minerals deeply ingrained in the umbilical cord of his family's land. Raphael just randomly tossed a few handfuls of seeds, I overheard Stilson scoff, swallowed by the smooth jazz music at a restaurant in Boston. It was the cradle of my family's land that forced their genes to mutate. The intellect belongs to the property deed bearing my family's name. He did not just spit words. That email was the final, fatal stab. A 60-page report was submitted demanding to strip my dad clean of his co-founder title, strangling our family's shares from 50 down to 15% to return value to the true owner. Stripped of veto power, I would be kicked out of the lab before I could even take off my lab coat. He wanted to swallow the entire company whole. Yesterday morning, I kicked open Stilson's door. The steady humming of the central air conditioning blew a biting cold draft onto the back of my neck. He had his feet kicked up on the leather desk, his eyes glued to the profit charts. What kind of bullshit is this? I slammed the stack of notices straight onto the glass. My dad coughed up blood to write every single genetic sequence for this company. Stilson did not even bother to blink. He nonchalantly used the tip of his pen to push the papers to the edge of the desk. Fabio, this is not a damn almshouse. His voice was ice cold. Mr. Raphael sparked an idea, agreed. But 15% is way too expensive for a thought that just flashed in his head, while the sweat, blood, land, and cow carcasses were shouldered by my family. Robbery. Uncle Yannickson could close his eyes and know exactly how dry and cracked that land was before my dad poured chemicals into it. My old man is senile, Stilson smirked, his expensive leather chair squeaking as he stretched. I am protecting my family's rice bowl. Next Friday closes the book. You have 10 days to clean out that garbage dump of a lab. Go buy some cardboard boxes. I gritted my teeth until I could taste the metallic tang of blood and turned my back to walk away. Punching his nose in would not get the shares back. This game was measured in black and white paper. I dove into the archives under the pale white fluorescent lights that flickered continuously. I needed to dig up the original Soil report, the very thing that would slap Stilson in the face with the fact that his family's land was just a pile of sour, acidic cinder. The man who signed that paper 30 years ago was Dr. Arthur, who is now living out his retirement in a remote corner of Michigan. I floored the gas for 6 hours, parting a freezing blizzard that slammed into the windshield to find him. I thought I had squeezed through a narrow gap, but I was wrong. The diner door cracked open, and the glaring red neon light cast through the smudged glass straight onto Dr. Arthur's table. He was not sitting alone. A clean-shaven lawyer was running his hand along the crease of his perfectly flat suit jacket, stuffing a pile of documents into his briefcase. Mr. Arthur averted his eyes. "Dr. Arthur," my heart pounded against my ribs. "I am sorry, Fabio." The old man's voice was murky. Grassgold just threw money around and bought out all my scrap paper. Absolute gag order. If I open my mouth, they will strip my pension clean. The lawyer zipped his briefcase shut with a sharp sound, smirked, and squeezed past my shoulder out the door. Stilson used my dad's own blood and sweat money to shove a rag into the mouth of the only witness. Every path had been sealed shut with concrete by him. The blizzard blasted bone-chilling cold into my collar as I shakily dialed my dad. The other end held only a heavy, labored sigh, the sigh of a man who carved his own flesh to feed a wolf, only to have it sink its fangs straight into his throat. The door slammed shut, lost the witness, empty-handed on evidence. The vultures on the board of directors had already caught the scent of skyrocketing dividend money if they could just cut out my dad's research stomach. But pitch black that night, my phone shrieked. The other end was choked with a wheezing breath, flickering amidst the sound of rain. "Fabio." A voice torn and hoarse like dragging worn wood. "Uncle Yannickson, come to the old barn, by the milking troughs, come alone." I floored the gas again, tearing through the Wisconsin night. The rickety wooden barn appeared. As I shoved the creaking door hard, the suffocating musty smell of rotting wood and dry hay rushed straight into my throat, the place that held the very first buckets of milk of our two families 30 years ago. Amidst the thick darkness, Uncle Yannickson huddled on a rusty barrel, draped in a frayed wool coat. Cold breath puffed from his mouth after every lung-tearing fit of coughing that slammed into the plywood walls. "Uncle Yannickson." I tiptoed, feeling the cold seep through my shoe heels. He looked up, his sunken eye sockets oozing bitter sorrow. He did not utter any cheap words of comfort. His bony hand thumped against the freezing metal block beside him. A vintage insulated aluminum thermos, dented and scratched, the kind used to store milk samples in the 90s. "Stilson thinks my brain is waterlogged, Fabio." His voice was murky but sharp as a knife. "He thinks I am paralyzed in a wheelchair, stone deaf to the bastard tricks he is stabbing behind Raphael's back. I can smell it all. I know everything." I dropped to my knees on the freezing dirt floor, level with his eyes. Dr. Arthur took the money. Stilson shoved a 60-page report proving your land is the mother of the genetic mutation. I cannot pry that fox's jaws open. Uncle Yannickson squinted and let out a bitter, raspy laugh. "My land is dead soil, Fabio. That bastard buries his face in Excel sheets, but he refuses to scoop up a handful of dirt and rub it together to feel how dry and barren it is." He lightly kicked the aluminum thermos toward me, twist the lid off. The metal threads ground against each other with a screech. Inside, there were no papers or audio tapes, only 3 tightly sealed plastic tubes. Each tube tightly packed with a core of pitch-black soil, labeled with a sickly yellow tag, bearing the embossed seal of the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture from 1993. Clipped beside them was a pitch-black ultraviolet flashlight, the kind typically used to scan for pathogens on leaves. I frowned. How are a few lumps of stale dirt going to smash Stilson's report? He will scream that this is just wet mud. Because a thief only craves the wallet, he does not know the safe's combination, Fabio. Uncle Yannickson thumped his chest and throat. Your dad did not just scatter seeds for heaven to grow. He locked the damn thing with a biological key. Rain lashed violently against the rusted tin roof. Every word he hissed through his teeth hit like a hammer, driving nails into wooden planks. I gripped the freezing aluminum thermos, feeling 30 years of brotherhood weighing heavily on both my biceps. But to blow this charade to pieces, I had to sneak this freakish thermos into the boardroom. And Stilson had eyes and ears strung up everywhere. Friday morning, 9 o'clock. The clicking sound of leather shoe soles striking the marble hallway of the Grassgold headquarters echoed dryly. My dad wore a gray suit, his face cold as ice, standing in front of the glass boardroom doors. but the edge of his leather briefcase showed clear indentations from his fingernails digging in. The moment the door handle was pressed down, two burly security guards lunged forward to block us. "Internal security regulations, sir." The guard in the black uniform blocked my chest, and I could clearly hear the coarse fabric rubbing together as he flexed his shoulders. "Director Stilson forbade any unapproved containers in the room. Please leave that metal thermos behind." My stomach knotted up. That bastard Stilson had cast a net right at the door. I was about to swat his arm away when my dad held me back. He closed in on the guard's face, forcing the man to step his heels back onto the carpet. "How long have you been wearing a guard's uniform, son?" My dad hissed in a deep, gravelly voice. 3 years." He swallowed with a hard gulp. 3 years. That means you are chewing food paid from the fund I personally signed for 30 years ago." My dad's eyes were sharp as razors. "I am still sitting in the co-founder's chair until the vote is settled. Do you want to snatch my belongings on camera and have me leave you eating dirt by noon?" The guard's face went dead pale. He shot a glance at the guy next to him. Both sheepishly retracted their hands and shifted to the side. My dad shoved the glass door hard. The air was thick and heavy, leaving only the humming of the projector's cooling fan blowing out hot air. 15 men in suits sat around the smooth oak table. At the head of the table, Stilson, with his hair slicked back shiny, smirked as he watched me slam the bulky aluminum thermos heavily onto the tabletop. "So cold you brought ginger tea, Fabio." Stilson snapped his fingers and the projector screen flashed on with a click. For a whole hour after that, it was his one-man show. Smooth, ironclad, not a single scratch. He tossed out all sorts of red and blue charts, dissecting the aging state of the research lab. Then he delivered the killing blow, the origins of grass gold. Rows of chemical data blared brightly on the screen, clearly proving that the groundwater veins of the Yannickson property were the true launchpad that birthed Aurora Blue. "We have been throwing royalty money in the wrong place for 30 years, Stilson's voice rang out shrilly. "Raphael is a good hired planter, full stop. The flesh and blood of this company is my family's land." I propose we strip Raphael of his voting rights, squeezing his shares down to 15%, just enough to manage that raggedy lab. The shareholders whispered among themselves. The rustling of opening briefcases sounded like a pack of rats stirring, gearing up to raise their hands and vote. "Are you done barking, Stilson?" My dad rapped his knuckles against the glass top. The noise died down instantly. He jerked his chin toward me. I grabbed the aluminum thermos and hauled it to the center of the room. The base of the thermos slammed into the glass with a deafening crash. "Stilson is not wrong." I gritted my teeth and wrenched the lid open. Land does not know how to lie, and this is the naked truth of it. I tipped the thermos upside down, pulling out the 3 compressed, pitch-black soil cores, and smacked them down with a heavy thud in front of the shareholders. Original soil cores drilled at the Yannickson property in '93, bearing the bright red seal of the Department of Agriculture. pH 4.5, sour as hell, dirt poor in trace elements. Forget about miracle grass, throw weeds down there for 2 weeks and their roots would rot dead on the spot. Stilson smacked his lips, his face as hard as stone. "Digging up some 30-year-old lumps of shit dirt to scare who?" He scoffed. "Dr. Arthur already signed the death certificate for those files. Go out to my farm right now and see how lush and green the Aurora grass grows. The current money-making dirt is the truth." I knew you would cling to those horns. I fished the rest of the items out of my bag, so I brought something else. I swiped my hand and snapped off the light switch. The automatic blinds slid completely shut. The room was engulfed in darkness, leaving only the murky gray light from the projector. I clicked the ultraviolet flashlight on. A sickeningly purple beam slashed a line across the table. 2 hydroponic trays were laid out. One tray of grass roots, dripping with freezing cold dewdrops, was brought from my dad's lab. The other tray held a clump of grass ripped straight from Stilson's farm, the exact stuff he had been caressing in his report. My dad knows exactly the true nature of ungrateful backstabbers. I threw every word right at his face. Over 20 years ago, he injected a fluorescent code straight into the roots of the original Aurora grass to expose thieves. I swept the ultraviolet beam across the lab's tray of grass. The shareholders completely held their breath. Under the purple light, the grass roots blazed with a neon green fluorescence, flashing blindingly like an electronic circuit, a counterfeit proof mark. And here. I whipped the beam straight over to Stilson's tray of grass, the thing he had been hyping up as a mutated treasure. Pitch black, just a bundle of dry, grayish buffalo grass roots. Stilson kicked his chair away, knocking over his glass of water with a crash. "Cheap trick, you swapped my grass." I flicked the lights back on. The stark white light pounded straight into Stilson's face, which was now profusely sweating and greasy. Nobody bothered to swap anything. My dad leaned on his hands and stood up. You are completely blind when it comes to Aurora Blue. Grow it to the 4th generation and it degrades into trash weeds. If it is not bathed in the enzyme solution I personally mix every spring. That formula is inside my skull, locked tight. I pinned my eyes on Stilson. You secretly spread grass in your garden for 6 months to suck up the data, but you forgot the old man who provided the bait seeds for your scam was your dad. Stilson choked on his breath. All 10 of his fingertips dug into the glass edge until they turned stark white. Uncle Yannickson knew damn well you were an ungrateful wolf. I delivered the final blow. He dumped a bag of trash weeds bought from a supply store on you. Your 60-page report is a chemical analysis of weeds. The entire room exploded. The loud noise of chairs scraping and shoving filled the air. The 60-page report on the table now looked no different than a stack of scrap paper used to wipe mouths. Stilson flared his nostrils and bulged his eyes, panting heavily. Panicking, he thrashed his hands violently against the table. So what? He roared, practically foaming at the mouth. So what if you proved the genetics? This company runs on shares. My dad holds 50%, and I hold his life and death power of attorney. I will crush you with sheer numbers. You do not represent anyone. A shrill, torn voice echoed in from the door. The whole room snapped their heads around in unison. The eerie screeching sound of wheelchair wheels scraped against the oak floor. Uncle Yannickson sat slumped in a wheelchair, having just been pushed through the door. He slapped a folder bearing the bright red stamp of the notary office onto the table. Stilson staggered backward. Dad. Why are you out in the draft? I came out to scoop up the trash you just scattered. Uncle Yannickson rapped his cane on the floor. Revocation of power of attorney, sprayed in fresh red ink. As of this exact second, you have nothing. You are crazy. I am raking in money for our family. Stilson shrieked. You smeared dirt on my family's face. Uncle Yannickson glared, his eyes wide. 30 years ago, the bank forced me onto the streets, surviving on watered-down porridge. Raphael brought that formula to save me from hanging myself, shoving half of this throne to me when he easily could have kicked me out. What you call business, I only see sheer treachery. Uncle Yannickson swept his eyes over the chaotic bunch of shareholders. I a 35% shareholder, demand a vote. Kick Stilson out of the chief strategy officer's seat immediately for the crime of fabricating fake data. A flurry of arms shot up like guillotines slamming down. 15 men at the table, not a single vote in his defense. Stilson stood rooted to the spot, his face as pale as a corpse. The 2 security guards from earlier barged in, twisted the sleeves of his suit jacket behind him, and threw him out by the neck to collect his things. The coup was extinguished without making another sound. A week later, my dad pushed the wheelchair, bringing Uncle Yannickson back to the old barn in Madison. I carried the heavily scratched aluminum thermos. The wind was lashing, but there was a soft glow of sunlight. My dad poured steaming hot coffee from his flask into the aluminum lid, shoving it straight into Uncle Yannickson's hands to keep them warm. Everyone kept their mouths shut about Stilson. He packed his bags and left the state, scurrying off to beg for a grunt job on the East Coast. Uncle Yannickson took a sip of coffee, the warmth rising from the aluminum lid spreading through the cold. He cast his eyes over the vast expanse of grass. The coffee is still as bitter as it was 30 years ago, Raphael. He pursed his lips into a smile. My dad slapped his thigh with a smack, plopping down onto the barrel. That is because your aluminum thermos is too battered, old friend. I pressed my back against the rough plywood frame, feeling the cold seep through my shirt. No matter how ruthless the conspiracies to tear each other apart were, the only thing lingering right now was the rich warmth of a friendship that no block of ice could ever bury.